Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT, back again with another episode of Locals Live. This is the view from YCS My House. We didn't get out to Locals this weekend because I was at the Pro Play Games event, and as a result, you're going to have to enjoy a match between myself and my roommate. I'm playing Monarch with Ehther at 3, and my roommate is playing Thunder Dragon, the only deck he is even remotely competent at, for only $5 a month. Your Patreon subscription can afford my roommate a second deck. Until then, he's competent enough to use Matrix to add Matrix, and then activate the hand effect of Hawk. This isn't a fantastic opener for him, but one copy of Colossus is routinely enough to shut Monarch down in its tracks. Monarch draws about 15 cards a turn, and with an inability to do so, it might be SOL. Of course, my opponent is just going to go through the motions here, summoning a copy of Thunder Dragon Colossus from the extra. What a powerful card that has plagued the metagame, even in a format where things like Dingarisu eat it for breakfast. Thankfully, my hand is okay. My opponent's going to check his grip real quick and see if there's anything else he can do. I don't believe there is. He's drawn exceptionally poorly, one of the hallmarks of Thunder Dragon. The deck is so powerful when it's allowed to pop off, and so completely mediocre when it doesn't. He's going to take a quick look at his grip. Oh, what can we see? Well, there's a Thunder Dragon Roar for sure. I think I see a Thunder Dragon Duo. We know about the additional copy of Matrix. It looks like potentially a Hawk in grip as well. Gosh, I don't know what you were supposed to do with that hand. This deck really needs a monster to normal summon, and without it, it routinely just looks terrible. Looks like he is actually going to activate the effect of Roar, adding the Hawk back to hand, so I suppose that card in hand wasn't a second copy of Hawk. We'll draw for turn, and ho-ho, something is lurking in my hand that just might get me out of this. We're going to lead with a copy of 1-for-1. I'm going to discard a copy of Erebus in order to special summon a copy of Ehther from my deck. Now, one thing Monarch folds to is hand traps. If my opponent had an Ash Blossom here, I likely would not be able to play the game. Instead, I'm going to be able to use Ehther's effect to summon Adios from my deck. Now, of course, because I didn't normal summon Adios, I'll be able to activate the effect of Adios, netting me a second summon instead of an additional tribute summon. Wow, incredible! You can see I have the Called by the Grave in the hand for insurance as well. We'll activate the Grave effect of Ehther, and this is one effect that people routinely forget about. It unbricks you by adding a large Monarch from your graveyard to the hand via his effect to discard a Monarch spell or trap from your grip. This allows us, in this scenario, to send a copy of the Prime Monarch to the graveyard in order to get back Erebus, after which we are likely going to tribute him away. I'm thinking real quickly about what I want to do here. And I've settled on Stormforth. Afterwards, I'm going to banish Stormforth in order to get the Prime Monarch from my graveyard, at which point I will tribute both my opponent's monster and my own copy of Ehther. Now, the reasoning behind this line of play is by banishing the Monarch Stormforth before I tribute the Ehther, I'm able to get a card in the banished zone, which Ehther, of course, adds back to my hand. This is a cute way to reuse the Monarch Stormforth in a matchup where it's very likely to matter. Of course, because there's no Thunder Dragon Colossus on my opponent's side of the field, I'm now free to Pantheism. This is the final remaining card on the limited list for Monarch, and boy does it deserve to be there. A lot of Monarch's power is locked behind this particular option, and more importantly, its repeatability. By banishing Pantheism and revealing 3 of the same card, I can basically domain lock from any particular instance. I've elected to activate Erebus' effect, shuffling a card from hand into the deck, as what is shuffling a Karibo really going to do for me? I believe I hit what appears to be my opponent's Hawk. Now let's take a quick look. He's going to reveal it. A Duo! Incredible. I'll be adding 3 copies of Domain to my hand, and for what it's worth, Domain has a little bit of text that people aren't familiar with. It does not, in fact, say while you control a tribute summoned monster, your opponent cannot summon monsters from the extra deck. Instead, it says, while you are the only person with a tribute summoned monster, your opponent cannot summon monsters from the extra deck. Some decks, like, say, Thunder Dragon, have ways to special summon monsters from their graveyard and afterwards tribute summon their level 5 or higher monsters, breaking domain lock without having to out Erebus. I'm going to set 1 card and pass it back to my opponent. Heads up, that set card is not a Monarch Stormforth. If it was, I would have an Ehther in hand, which I don't. So unfortunately for me, I am not going to be able to walk away with this game so easily. My opponent's going to lead with a copy of what looks like a Lure of Darkness. Yes, this is an incredibly powerful card in Thunder Dragon. Not only does it dig you deeper and find you your sideboard cards, more importantly, it allows you to proc the effects of your Dark Thunder Dragons. Those are Thunder Dragon Dark, and this one, Thunder Dragon Roar. Thankfully, I have a Called by the Grave, and my opponent has a Thunder Dragon Roar in their graveyard, so I can banish that, and importantly, it negates the effect of that monster as well. If it just banished it, it'd still be exceptionally powerful, but unfortunately would trigger the effects of the Thunder Dragons. Now you can see there's two darks and a light monster in my opponent's graveyard. He's going to banish one of them, that is the Link Haribo, alongside a Thunder Dragon Matrix in order to special summon a copy of Thunder Dragon Duo from hand. A lot of people forget about this card. It certainly is the most forgettable Thunder Dragon, routinely does not end up turning into a Colossus, and as a result sees far less on-board play than any of the other ones, but Thunder Dragon Duo is insane. He does so many things for the deck. If you're floodgated out of the extra deck or your opponent has eaten the remainder of your Colossi, he's a fantastic beater, and importantly, he's an extender as well. If he destroys an opponent's monster by battle, which is particularly easy to do, you can banish a card from your graveyard, and then afterwards add a Thunder monster from your deck to your hand. Routinely, this means you're banishing something like a Dark and popping off further, adding like a Denko Second to hand in some old variants of the deck. Now, this Thunder Dragon Duo is doing one very important thing, which is breaking domain lock. When you add a Thunder Dragon monster from your hand to the graveyard via their effect, it gains 300 attack, which puts it just slightly over Erebus's 2800 and able to walk over him efficiently. My opponent here is just deciding what exactly he wants to be adding from his deck to his hand. Now, Thunder Dragon Duo's effects don't end there. At my end step, if it survives, my opponent will be able to add, I believe, a Thunder card from their deck to the top of their deck, fresh for the drawing next turn. I certainly don't want that to happen, so I'll have to figure out a way not only to beat this individual card, but likely the next individual card that my opponent will go for as well. That, of course, is going to be a Thunder Dragon Colossus, because now that they are afforded the ability to go into the extra deck, they are going to use it. Still mulling over here, there are so many options. We've already used the effect of Hawk, so of course that's right out. He could add a copy of Dark, but Dark doesn't really do anything on this board state unless there's another Thunder monster in his hand and he elects to go for something like a Titan over something like a Colossus. Not a particularly good idea against a deck who has monsters large enough to walk over Titan. He's thinking real quickly, and I think what he lands on is actually Thunder Dragon Duo. So, unfortunately, this card is not self-restrictive, and my opponent can immediately go grab another one. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, he doesn't have a Dark monster and a Light monster in the graveyard. How on earth is he going to summon this card? Well, it's simple. The first thing he'll do is tribute this copy of Thunder Dragon Roar for our big purple friend, and afterwards he'll end on a copy of Thunder Dragon Duo. This really puts the pressure on me. Not only do I have to out Colossus, of course, in order to play any modicum of Yu-Gi-Oh! I am also going to have to out both of these individual monsters, lest my opponent is going to be able to tutor anything they want from their deck to their hand by virtue of adding it to the top of the deck and then drawing it for turn. So just checking Thunder Dragon Duo's wording right now, it is a very confusing card whose actual effects come up very infrequently. Routinely, it's just used to push for damage, of course, and as a result, a lot of people aren't familiar with the deep intricacies of the Duo. We're still in battle phase, and my opponent decides he will be attacking the Squire. Asking real quick about the defensive stats of the Prime Monarch. I don't think you'd ever attack into the Prime Monarch regardless. It's very easy for me to banish it in end phase, and you'd have to invest something into it because, of course, it has 2,400 defense. Just under Dante, which was relevant for the last format this deck was playable during. My opponent is now going to special summon a copy of Thunder Dragon Duo and end on a singular solitary Colossus. Now, of course, I do have a copy of Erebus in Graveyard. I do have the ability to spin this Colossus back should I add this Erebus back to the hand, but it's going to be a little harder for me to eat my opponent's entire board. Another quick look at Domain. It's not like Erupt, so it doesn't go to the graveyard or anything, but it is completely useless while I don't have a Monarch on my field, nor a Monarch in the hand with which to reduce for its other effect. My opponent's going to sec one card and pass it back to me. I will draw for turn and hope for the best. The first thing I'm going to do, of course, is activate the grave effect of Ideos. This can banish a special summon an idea from my graveyard. I'll do just that. Then I'll activate the effect of Idea in order to special summon an Ideos from deck. Are you getting flashbacks yet? Obviously, the audio for this is muted, but I assure you my opponent was saying, "Oh yeah, I remember why I hate this card." Of course, because we haven't performed our normal summon, we now have the ability to do 2 of them, should we so desire, or find the material. One thing we're missing this game is the Monarch's return, which means we aren't able to find more Monarchs off of our singular copy of Erebus. We're just going to have to loop the big boy repeatedly. So I'm going to set these 2 boys down, and then my opponent's going to activate Paleozoic Dynamiscus. This is a little frustrating. Paleozoic Dynamiscus isn't fantastic here. There's not really a time that it's going to be particularly frightening. Maybe the original Monarch was the send? I'm not really sure, but I have to hedge toward the banish of the card that will just add this Pantheism back to my hand and permit me to pop off further. At the very least, this means I am locked into only Erebus, and it is going to have to be the thing that wins me the game. So if you'll recall, last turn I did add a particularly significant card to my hand, which will be helping me out here. We are going to be activating from our hand, you guessed it, the card that spent so long on the limited list, the one that plagued the nightmares of everyone who summoned a big boss in the year 2016, the one, the only, the Monarch Stormforth. We're also playing the worst rarity of it, Gold Rare. I'm thinking real quick about which monster I want to tribute. Tributing this copy of Colossus, of course, would put fuel in my opponent's graveyard, but importantly, would also give me a target if I had a second called by. I don't, so it doesn't matter, but, you know, always important to think of hypotheticals. Next, we're going to activate the effect of Erebus, which of course is going to be able to shuffle this copy of Colossus back into the extra deck. Important, of course, that we're able to out the monster with battle and effect protection. We'll attack into the remaining copy of Thunder Dragon Duo and do the first damage we've done all match, the 800 boost from Domain of the Monarch. I feel as if we're in a pretty commanding position for Game 1. Of course, our opponent not only has to find an out to Domain of the Monarchs, they also have to find an out to my board. Even if they tribute something like a Thunder Dragon, getting over Erebus is no easy task, and preventing the recursion is similarly hard. They draw off the top, and finally, after exhausting so many resources, it looks like they have drawn dead. That appears to be an instant fusion in the face of Domain. Yikes. They'll pass it back to me, and at end step, I'll activate the grave effect of the Prime Monarch, switch my monsters to attack position, activate Domain, revealing an Erebus in my hand, tribute this Eidos, activate Erebus's effect, and get in for just slightly over lethal. That's 28, 28, 1000, and 1000. People forget that the original Monarch can in fact attack. And the importance of a Game 1 victory cannot be overstated here. We are going to be able to go first at least one additional time. Monarch routinely has trouble establishing a board through disruption, so being able to set up Domain Lock uninterrupted is extremely important. However, in Game 2, it looks like our opponent's first turn grip is likely to allow us to proceed unencumbered regardless. They look at their hand for about 30 seconds and then say, pass. Unfortunately, we are about to do the same. This is the problem that has plagued Monarch for generations. It's simply unable to not brick in 30% of its games. We're playing 3 Ehther, we're maxed out on Squires, and still, we open hands that end in this. Now, thankfully, those 2 cards are relevant. They are both called by the grave, so should we ever draw our way out of this, there is about a 90% chance we'll actually be able to perform our plays. Our opponent, unfortunately, is in a similar position. If they're able to establish Thunder Dragons, they might make some monsters that are immune to called. The Battle of the Bricks is never particularly enjoyable to watch. They'll rip one card off the deck, see if they can draw out of it, and he just throws up his hands. It's another copy of Dimension Shifter. Okay, well, he is going to slowly, methodically, theatrically place every individual card on the table and pass it back to me once more. And okay, we've drawn out of it. Simple and clean. Monarch is incredibly powerful if you're able to start with a 7-card hand. Just play it in Magic. We'll lead with a copy of Pantheism, so we're going to discard a copy of the Prime Monarch. And this is a bit of a worst-case scenario for our opponent. It's going to allow us both to draw a couple of cards. and do so with the copy of the Prime Monarch in the graveyard. Obviously, what he wants to do is activate Dimension Shifter before we activate Pantheism, because Pantheism can only be activated by sending a card to the graveyard. It is not a trade-in. It is a you must discard to graveyard or else, which means it wouldn't be activatable if we're under macro. But it's kind of hard to hold Shifter in hand, knowing that we did absolutely nothing last turn. He'd have to have perfect information and decides, okay, it's better to keep that card banished as well, the Pantheism out of the graveyard, to which I say, I have a Called by the Grave. From this position, we should be in a commanding lead. We are going to first activate the effect of Pantheism in Graveyard. That's going to get us 3 cards, each of which is actually just Tenacity of the Monarch. Now, I don't have any repeatability here. I unfortunately have drawn 0 Squires. Drawing specifically Pantheism means that we can send a Tenacity to the Graveyard, which will allow us to banish said Tenacity in order to get this Prime Monarch out of the graveyard and onto the field. We need a domain, so the Ehther in our hand, of course, is summonable, and we'll take a Stormforth here because we've got everything else we require. Adding Stormforth to hand is, of course, extremely powerful, but gets much better once you recognize that Ehther is able to be summoned on your opponent's turn, and we would be able to, theoretically, prevent our opponent from doing absolutely anything that would frighten us. We're going to go ahead and summon Ehther here, then we'll activate the effect of Ehther and the effect of Return of the Monarchs in order to get a copy of Erebus to our hand. So now we have 2 easy ways we can get rid of Colossuses on the board. One can be tributed, the other can be spun back. Ehther's effect is going to bin a couple of Monarch spells and traps from our deck to the graveyard and summon another Ehther, and this is really what we got out of Ehther's move from 1 to 3 over the past 2 ban lists. The ability to summon Ehther with Ehther consistently, and of course, have additional copies in your hand at any given time. We'll do a hot 5,600 points of damage and pass it back to my opponent. They will draw for turn, and that is the face of a man who is more salt than human. A terrible rip off the top, clinching game 2 and allowing us to walk away with a set that I think pretty clearly we had no business winning. Well, that's it. I feel pretty comfortable calling Monarch the best deck, and I will see you next time.